Aunt Green, Aunt Brown, and Aunt Lavender. Once there was a little town, and in that town a little street, and in that street a little yellow house, and in that little yellow house lived 3 sisters, Aunt Green, Aunt Brown, and Aunt Lavender. Though they must have had real names, all the children in the town used these nicknames for them because sure as dandelions are yellow and bluebells are blue, Aunt Green always wore a green dress, Aunt Brown always wore a brown dress, and Aunt Lavender always had a lilac dress. The little yellow house had a garden with a fence along the lane, and in the middle of the fence there was a green painted gate that you had to go through if you wanted to visit the aunts, because they had no entrance door onto the road. Over the fence a pear tree hung. The tree gave lots of small and juicy pears, which were very tempting for the children who passed by. But if any naughty boy tried to climb the fence to take one, the old man who lived across the street would quickly put his head out the window and shake his fist. He had a long blue coat, the old gentleman, and blue spectacles, and so he was called Uncle Blue by the children in the town. If you ever went to visit one of the aunts, you had to ring the bell at the gate, and then Aunt Lavender would look out from her window and pull a string so that the door opened. In the garden, you were sure to find Aunt Green, either raking with her green rake or watering with her large green watering can. Or she might be sitting in the garden, topping and tailing gooseberries or shelling peas. She might look rather stern, Aunt Green, because she probably wondered if you were one of those children who had tried to climb after her pears. In the kitchen, you would find Aunt Brown baking gingerbread or making toffee or caramels. Nobody in town made sweets as well as Aunt Brown, and so the local ladies always went to her when they were having children's parties. Aunt Brown was the kindest of the aunts, and every child liked to have a reason to visit her. When they would, they'd be almost sure to get a toffee or a caramel, and without fail, a piece of gingerbread. In the soft fruit season, Aunt Lavender was also to be found in the kitchen, making a syrup, and everyone said the best currant jelly in town. But mostly she would sit in the parlor embroidering big flowers onto canvas. And if you went in, she was very particular about your wiping your feet and wanted you to sit quietly and answer all of her questions politely. On a little cushion at her feet, little Dot would normally be lying. He was a black poodle that all 3 aunts loved very much and took for walks. And depending on which aunt he was out with, he would either wear a green ribbon, a brown ribbon, or a lavender ribbon in his ear. But on Sunday afternoons, when all 3 aunts went walking together, he had to wear a black rosette on his tail. One Sunday afternoon, the aunts went out walking with little Dot. And when they had got a short way from the house, Aunt Green had to turn back for her umbrella. And again, when they had walked a little way, Aunt Lavender thought she should fetch her flowery shawl because it might get cool towards the evening. And yet again, when they had walked on a little while, Aunt Brown turned back for a snack of gingerbread for them to have along the way. After all of this, when they had gone a few steps further, they met Mr. Blue coming home from his Sunday walk, and they stayed to have a chat. Then little Dot lost patience because he was being made to sit for so long and wait. And away he trotted by himself, knowing perfectly well the way to go. Near the big oak tree on the road out to town, Dot met an organ grinder and started to bark at him. And when the organ grinder tried to chase him off with his stick, Dot barked even more and went for the man's trousers, upon which the organ grinder thought to himself, what a fine little dog this would be to teach tricks in place of a monkey he had lost a year before. So he popped the poodle into his sack and continued on his journey. When the ants reached the big oak tree and sat down on the bench to have their gingerbread snack, they missed Dot at last and called out for him, but he was nowhere to be seen. And here the road split 3 ways, with a path through the fields to the left and another through the woods to the right. The ants decided each of them would take a different path in search of little Dot, and they agreed to meet back at the oak tree in an hour. Aunt Green took the path through the fields and soon came to a green meadow where she saw a barn with a ladder placed against a wall, leading up to the hayloft. When she began to call out for Dot, she thought she heard a whining noise coming from inside. "I'm sure that must be Dot," said Aunt Green to herself, and began to climb the ladder. But as she reached the top, there appeared a small kitten that had been mewing because it was stuck in the hayloft. And in the next moment, her foot knocked down the ladder behind her. So there she found herself with the kitten, both of them unable to climb down. Meanwhile, Aunt Lavender took the path through the forest until she came to a little stream with a plank over it. Stepping carefully, she was almost on the other side when the plank swayed. She slipped into the water and got her shoe and stocking quite soaked, as well as the hem of her skirt. So she had to take them off to dry them in the sun. And while she sat and waited, she called out for Dot. But there was not a sign of him. Aunt Brown took the road straight ahead and asked everyone she met if they had seen a dear little black dog, but nobody had. And after a long while, she saw a boy and a girl crying in the middle of the road. "Why are you crying, children?" Aunt Brown said. "We have lost a penny and cannot find it," the boy said. "How did you lose it?" said Aunt Brown. "Well, we met a man with a box on his back and a pig in the bag," the girl said. "And it shrieked," said the boy. "And we only wanted to pat the pig a little," the girl said. "But the man got angry and we ran away, and that's how we lost our penny." "And now we will be punished when we get home," said the boy. "But your mother cannot be so harsh over just a penny," Aunt Brown said. "We have no mother," said the girl. "Well, then your father." "We have no father," the boy said. "We live with an old woman called Washerwoman Wendy, but she does not like us at all." "And she thinks that we eat too much," the boy said. "Poor children," Aunt Brown said. "Dry your tears now, and I will look in my bag and see what I have for you." Then she looked in her bag and found a penny for them, which made them stop crying and laugh out loud. Before she left the 2 children, Aunt Brown gave them some gingerbread and asked them to come and see her next time they came to town. And she said that if they caught sight of a dear little black dog with a rosette in his tail, they should bring him straight to her house. Then Aunt Brown went quickly home because it was so late, expecting to find her sisters already there, perhaps with little Dot. But when she arrived, the house was empty. She was so upset she burst into tears. Just then Mr. Blue happened to pop in for a visit, comforted her, and said he would go out searching for them. Aunt Brown put on the kettle and laid the table, and even put out Dot's bowl for him, so that everything would be ready when they got home. Meanwhile, the two children, who were called Peter and Lotta, went on their way thinking how curious it was to have found so kind a person in the world as Aunt Brown, and how she was looking everywhere for her dog. Soon they came to a woody hill and heard a pitiful whine that sounded as if it came from a dog. And a few yards in front of them they saw a man lying asleep with his hat over his eyes, and beside him a box and a sack. "Be careful, Peter," the girl said. "Don't you see it's that man with the pig?" And they heard the whining noise again coming from the sack. "Perhaps it isn't a pig," the girl said. "Perhaps it's little Dot." Then the boy called out quietly, "Dot, little Dot." And at that very moment there came a yelping from the bag, and it rolled over and over. Peter quickly went to untie the sack and rushed the little dog and jumped up on the children and licked them joyfully. And taking Dot in their arms, he and the girl ran away as fast as they could before the man could wake and chase after them. When they got to the oak tree on the little road, Dot dashed off into the woods with Peter and Lotta running behind, afraid of losing him. Among the trees they came across Aunt Lavender, sitting on the other side of the stream. Dot splashed through the water and jumped onto her lap, making her dress all wet, but she didn't mind because she was so pleased to see him. Peter and Lotta then helped Aunt Lavender back across the plank bridge, each of them holding a hand, and they all set off for home. But once again on the road, Dot would not go home, but rushed off along the other path through the fields. And when he got to the barn, he stopped and barked until Aunt Green appeared in the hayloft door. She had fallen asleep in the hay with the kitten and was delighted to be awoken by the sound of little Dot outside. Peter and Lotta put up the ladder and helped Aunt Green climb down with the kitten in her arms. And Dot jumped up and down for sheer joy. Once more they set off for the road home, as the moon started to rise in the evening sky. At the roadside they came across Mr. Blue, who was trying to decide which way to go. And little Dot jumped so high that he knocked Mr. Blue down and made him lose his stick and sit on his hat. Back at the house, Aunt Brown had everything nearly ready for tea when she heard a joyful barking in the lane, and looking out, saw a grand procession coming towards her. First, little Dot trotting happily along, then Mr. Blue with his squashed hat, then Aunt Green with haystacks clinging to her and a kitten in her arms, and then Aunt Lavender with their skirt tucked up, and then two barefooted children hand in hand, and last of all the town policemen walking behind to keep order. After a huge tea, which the children were allowed to eat as much as they wanted, Peter and Lotta started to say goodbye. Upon which Dot began to whine pitifully because he didn't want to be parted from them. Then Aunt Green said she had often thought it would be a good thing to have help in the garden. Aunt Brown said too that she really needed help making sweets in the kitchen. And Aunt Lavender pointed out that it was hard for her to thread a needle, so weak had her eyes become of late. Therefore, the aunts all thought Peter and Lotta should really stay on to help them in the house. And you can imagine how happy the children were. The little kitten also got to stay, and they called her Esmeralda. She helped by catching rats and drinking cream and playing with Aunt Lavender's ball of wool. Little Dot and Esmeralda soon became great friends. 1 hour every day, Peter and Lotta spent at Mr. Blue's house having lessons in reading and writing and arithmetic. And he also made sure they didn't become too spoilt by their 3 aunts. For now and then, Aunt Brown put toffee and gingerbread in their pockets, and Aunt Green secretly told them they could eat all the gooseberries and pears that they wanted from the garden, and Aunt Lavender kept calling them into the kitchen to taste her berry syrup. Strangely enough, the children survived all these good things and became happier and happier as time went on. But the happiest of all was Dot. He never wore a black rosette on Sundays anymore, but a green ribbon in one ear, a brown ribbon on the other, and a lilac ribbon on his tail, all to celebrate the happy Sunday where he found his 3 new friends, Peter, Lotta, and Esmeralda. The end.